Have you ever thought how does your hand do so many movements at a time? Either holding something, gripping something, touching objects, and much more. So guys, I'm going to tell you about the anterior compartment forearm muscles, right? I'm going to tell you a hint, a trick from which you can easily learn the four superficial muscles, one intermediate muscle, and three deep muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm. What you have to do is take four fingers this way, place it just below the elbow, right, the cubital fossa, like this. Now, and the thumb should be placed below these four fingers that way. Now what you have to do is name these fingers, starting from the index finger, P, F, P, F, and F, right? Now what does these letters stand for? P, pronator teres, F, flexor carpi radialis, P, palmaris longus, F, flexor carpi radialis, and F again for flexus digitorum superficialis. So what you have to learn is that, remember, the anterior compartment muscles are basically responsible for the flexion of either the wrist or the fingers, right? So as the name tells you, pronator teres is responsible for the pronation of the forearm, right? Supination, and this is responsible for pronation of the forearm. Flexor carpi radialis and flexor carpi ulnaris are basically responsible for the wrist flexion. Fine, they're responsible for wrist flexion. Just point two fingers this way and you can see this tendon over here. You can even palpate it. This is the palmaris longus tendon. One of the strangest fact about this muscle is that this muscle is basically absent in 15% of the population. Fine, so it also aids in the wrist flexion. Now coming to these four muscles, pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris lie in the superficial layer, right? Now the flexor digitorum superficialis, which was pointed by this thumb, this is an intermediate layer muscle, and this is basically responsible for the flexion at the proximal interphalangeal joints. Fine, at the proximal interphalangeal joints. Now coming towards the three other muscles of the anterior compartment that lie in the deep layer. If you just take off the superficial part out of it, below that is the layer that is known as the deep layer. Now coming towards the deep layer, so it has three muscles, right? Three muscles, namely flexor digitorum profundus, flexor pollicis longus, and pronator quadratus. Fine. So flexor digitorum profundus is different than the flexor digitorum superficialis we just discussed earlier in the superficial layer. How is it different? The flexor digitorum superficialis in the superficial layer is responsible of the flexion of the fingers at the proximal interphalangeal joints, right? Whereas the flexor digitorum profundus is responsible for the flexion at the metacarpophalangeal joints at the proximal as well as at the distal interphalangeal joints. Also it aids in the wrist flexion. Fine, so this is the basic difference in between these two muscles. Then coming towards the flexor digitorum, flexor pollicis longus. So as pollicis means thumb, so flexor pollicis longus is basically responsible for the flexion of the thumb, right? Now what you have to keep in mind is there are three wrist flexors, right? That are flexor carpi radialis, flexor carpi ulnaris, and palmaris longus. There are three finger flexors, namely flexor digitorum superficialis, flexor digitorum profundus, and flexor pollicis longus. The rest two, that are pronator quadratus and pronator teres, so they are responsible for the pronation of the forearm. Give this video a big thumbs up and stay tuned for new videos. Thank you.